Right.
And
So, oh yeah, there's Vicky. Hey, Vicky.
Hi there. Sorry I'm late.
That's okay. Lori just joined about 10 seconds before you, so we're just.
Okay. I texted you.
Yeah. I appreciate that. No problem, y'all. Let's go ahead and get this meeting started. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I am going to read our COVID statement. The Commission on Equitable Housing and Development meeting has now commenced. It is January 26, 2023 at 1:07 p.m. This meeting is being held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and protect the public health. As we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and guests to mute yourselves until called upon to speak to avoid feedback and background noise. For those who have dialed in using the call-in number, to unmute to speak, dial *6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function to request to speak or to announce that you are leaving the meeting so that we can track quorum. Also, in order to comply with the state open meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call using audio, not by using the chat function. Let's see, we'll get back to the agenda. And with that, I will do roll call. Lori Mazurbo.
Present.
Vicky Cusino.
Here.
Mike Edmonds.
I am present.
And we have a quorum. Everybody on the subcommittee is here. Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year. I know it's been a minute since we met. I hope you all had a nice holiday. I think I saw an email. Do we have any meeting minutes to approve?
Yes, you do. But I also recognize that you got them late. So, and that's my apologies for that. So it's up to you whether you want to approve them or defer to the next meeting. And now you have them.
Cool. Is there a motion to either approve the meeting minutes or to table that and approve them at the look over them and then approve them at the next meeting?
If there's a second, I'm willing to motion to approve them.
Does anybody would anybody prefer to wait?
I haven't seen them.
Okay.
I hate to push us down the road, but yeah, I'd like to wait.
Okay, great. So I don't know if we need to make a motion or anything, but let's just wait until the next meeting to give us a chance to look over the meeting minutes and make any changes and approve them. Let's see. Okay, number 3 on the agenda is the chair's report. So there are a couple of things on the agenda here. The first thing on the list is the equity study that the ASU class did last semester and finished up towards the middle to end of December. I believe that has been sent out to everybody. I know at the very least it was on the website. So I guess I'll just start first by asking if folks have had a chance to review that study and if folks have any thoughts about it.
I did get a chance to skim it. It was great information. If I can find my note, I did have a takeaway, not a big question or anything, but something I was going to mention to the subcommittee, but let me go back and see if I can find it in my notes.
Sure. Vicky or Lori, did you guys have a chance to look it over by chance?
I did, yes. I mean, I think it was well done, and that you know, that would have taken any of us an incredible amount of time to do, and that it's a really great place to start. And I was impressed by their work.
Did you have any main takeaways, Lori, or put you on the spot?
Yeah.
I know it was a lot.
It was, well, I mean, it was very interesting to me. I'll be honest, I thought our rental, like, it was so interesting to me looking at the different cities, and just blew my mind that our rent is so similar to some much larger cities, which then to me, my takeaway was we've got a big problem if our rents are in the neighborhood of rents like Seattle and Austin. It feels like to me. I mean, Tucson is not a tech city or I don't know what the right words are, but as I was looking at that, I was just really surprised at, I would figure those cities would have a much different rental rate than us, and we were very close.
Although actually, Lori, I think that your instincts are correct, because I just quickly because when I saw like the median home price in Austin in the report, I was like, that is not possible. And so I Googled it real quick, and what I saw was like the median home prices now are like $600,000 in Austin. So I don't know why there was such a discrepancy, but I also saw in that same, when I Googled it, it was like Austin's now the 5th most expensive metro to live in. So I didn't look at the median rents or anything, but that was the main thing I think that jumped out to me that was not accurate in my opinion.
So I just assumed it was accurate and didn't Google and was like, wow, we've got some problems in Tucson because we aren't Austin and we're not Seattle, right? So actually I'm relieved to hear that, and not that a $600,000 home in Austin is a good thing, but that's not our medium home price. And so, I mean, that's comforting in some ways. So then did they just give us wrong data? Like what?
I didn't take the time to like go in depth and look and see why, where they got the data and why that just jumped out at me. It's like, that is just not possible. So hey, Joe, do you have any thoughts about like why there was such a discrepancy? I don't know if you've had a chance to look at this study or not.
I've looked at like the first half of it. I haven't gotten to the back half. I don't know whether that's just, I haven't gotten to the footnotes, so I don't know where they're grabbing the data from, I suppose.
Yeah.
I doubt, but that the median housing prices were near the beginning, and we actually have it open here. Scroll. Is Tucson's median home price 155,000 anymore?
No.
Okay.
It's like
it's
like
we're
350.
we're all working off of old data here, and ours has probably, I want to say what was the last estimate y'all saw? Because I thought mine, when I saw, was 300 something. So if ours has doubled in the last few years, okay, yeah, Austin's has gone up 4 times, and they've gotten it worse. But I don't know. Maybe that's just the case. When I think about the impacts of affordability and displacement and gentrification, I think it's just hitting every place at different times, and the places that were on the leading edge were New York, San Francisco, Austin, Seattle, Portland, Denver, and Las Vegas were kind of next, and Phoenix, and we're getting it now too, and it's getting to all these other places at different times. So I wonder if the more drastic rises are the places that were kind of on that leading edge and are already further into this cycle than we are, and Austin and Seattle would certainly qualify for that.
And I think that like one of the like least accurate pieces of data, if they're using like ACS data or just federal data, it's just not, the home price stuff is just not accurate. It doesn't keep up. I just, again, real quickly Googled. So like according to realtor.com, it says the median listing home price in Austin is $599. So, there's data varies. And then Zillow says that Tucson home values are $325,000. I don't know if that's the median, but according to Zillow, that's up 10.3% over the last year alone. So anyway, so sorry, Laurie, kind of got sidetracked there.
No, I think that's probably a good thing we need to note if we're going to share this with the continuum, right? We don't want to be giving data that doesn't look accurate, because you know, I zeroed in on the rents because that seems to impact most of the population that I'm used to working with, because they're going to be renters. And so that it was concerning.
Yeah. What about you, Vicky? Did you have a chance to look it over or have any takeaways?
No, I haven't. I only briefly looked at it, so I don't have any takeaways, but I'd rather not say anything now, but I'll look at it in more detail. Some things stuck out to me, but I need to actually read it.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I will just say that I thought that one of the things that was, I guess that just reflecting back, I feel like what the study showed is that basically the way that Chicago is looking at equity and housing equity is kind of on the same level as Tucson. I don't know that I would say I remember it being like similar exactly, though that may be true. But what I did think really jumped out to me was that both Austin and Seattle are looking at this issue in a much more comprehensive manner. And I hate to do this too, because I do know that the city of Tucson is looking at a lot of this information and does have a lot of the reporting, but I think there's just a next level up of kind of connecting the dots. Like I know that I think both Austin and Seattle, if I'm not mistaken, looked at like basically had like an opportunity index that was combined with like a gentrification and displacement index. So it just seemed a lot more granular, more drilled down in a way that I think allows those cities to really look at, okay, here's the current situation as best as we can determine. And then what they're doing is they're looking every year to see how those things are changing, right? So they've got their kind of like baseline, and then they're looking regularly to see like, hey, are we making progress here? And like, what are the policies that are in place to address the issues that our metrics are telling us, and are those policies working? So, again, I think that it would be good for like the city of Tucson to kind of compare, what particularly Austin and Seattle, how are they approaching this and looking at these issues versus how the city of Tucson is doing it? And is there anything that can be added to like the way Tucson is looking at it and measuring this issue? Because the one thing I really don't want to say, and I feel like I kind of get on this a little bit without really knowing how true this is like, I still find it difficult to kind of conceptualize what the city of Tucson is actually doing, if they're doing more than I kind of give them credit for, or if they're not, or what. But I do think that this report kind of gives something for both the commission and the city to kind of reflect on and compare, about how to address this issue moving forward.
Hey, Jay, I'd like to speak to that for a moment, because I have the same feeling sometimes. I sit back and I look, I try to read everything and get my hands on and go to meetings and listen and all this kind of stuff. And I also say, okay, so what are we doing? Are we doing enough? What might we be doing? And then again, back to the measurement, is it enough? Will it be enough? So I have those same questions as well. As well as what, the other thing is, I know, we can't do the mind meld all the time, but I'd like to know what's in the mind of, let's say, HCD or whatever. What are you guys planning that you haven't told me about that? Because when it comes, it's a nice surprise, but I'm like, it'd be kind of good for me to go, maybe have a little hope and spirit, like, oh, okay, I know they're working on this. Okay, that's good. I'll just keep my mouth shut and I won't say anything, but I get the feeling that it's working towards the goal. Hey, on some of the documents though, I did find something that kind of, and this was just, it's probably not for this subcommittee, but it kind of, I remember this is what threw me off. So in the one document, the revised deliverable context for problem document. So, I'm scrolling through it, I get halfway through it, down to the Affordable and Public Housing Programs section. And I start to read the paragraph on HCV, Housing Choice Vouchers, and for whatever reason, it hit me that I don't know how to use a housing choice voucher. I really don't know exactly how it works and all that. So I spent, just by starting out with one search, I wound up with hours trying to read just as a regular person. When I get the housing choice voucher, how much is it? How do I use it? And I couldn't find like simple explanations and answers for people. And that kind of bugs me. I mean, after doing some reading and copying and pasting and rewording, I understood it. And I understand, but I have to go back to my notes. I couldn't completely simply explain it to somebody. But like I said, that was just something out of the doc.
Well, and, I think it's a really great point, Mike. And, again, I think this is an area where, like, the city of Tucson is doing good work, right? It's like the source of income ordinance was passed, and, there have been some hiccups with the state government and kind of, working through that. But, that is the whole idea there, is to make it easier for, people that are using vouchers, housing choice vouchers or Social Security, whatever source of income they have, so that, they can use their vouchers without, landlords just saying off the top, we don't take anybody who uses vouchers. So, I do think that that's an area where, it does kind of, to your point, Mike, kind of crosses over with what we're talking about here, particularly with equity. So, but it's a great point. Anything else? Anybody else? Joe, do you have any thoughts?
Not really, but like I said, I'm on like page 14 of it, 15 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I wanted to do two things related to the study. One is just to like have an opportunity for us to talk about it as much as we could, bounce anything around, and then start talking about what, if anything, we want to do with this as a subcommittee. Do we want to, give ourselves more time, maybe next meeting, to really dive in to the study as much as we can, and come back together and talk about it a little more, and decide whether or not we want to take some sort of action? What do y'all think about what the subcommittee could or should do? Because really, I mean, this was also done for the entire commission, so it's not necessarily our responsibility to like take action or do something, but we certainly could. I think. What do y'all think about that?
So in that case, then maybe, at least my thoughts are, let's just share it with the commission, let everybody have a chance to dive into it, and then maybe as a commission and even a subcommittee later, we can come back a meeting or two later and discuss.
Anybody else? It is on the agenda, I believe, for the full commission meeting, so we will have a chance to do that. I think that sounds like a good idea to me, Mike. Joe, I see you're off mute. Vicky, go ahead as well, either of you.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Just share it and let everybody read it. But it was this committee that wanted the study, right? So I feel like maybe we should have some sort of call to action, or, otherwise it's like, okay, we have more data.
Right. No, that makes sense.
I think Mike had the right idea. Bring it to the commission. This commission can have a more in-depth discussion of it at next meeting, and then the CHD, maybe we intro it to a discussion of the whole commission, not in next week's meeting, but is it next week? Yeah, next week's meeting. And then I suppose in the March meeting would be I'm also hesitate to kind of kick the can on stuff, but yeah, kind of give it to everybody and say, hey, we had this, here's what it is. give everybody a month to digest it and then come back and have, spend a chunk of that meeting talking about it.
Cool. So I think we're all kind of on the same page about what to do. It's definitely something that, we'll report back onto the full commission. And like I said, I'm pretty sure that I've asked for this to be on the full commission agenda for our upcoming meeting. So it'll give us all more time to look over it, digest it, and Vicky, as you said, kind of come back and think about any action items or any actions we want to take on it. With that, is there anything else regarding the equity study that y'all want to talk about at this time, or should we move on to the next agenda item? All right. The next agenda item is also Chair's report, Mapping Racist Covenants Project. Are y'all aware of this project? I think it's been talked about, but I can give a little bit of background.
I think I've heard of it, but yeah, go ahead and give me the headline.
Sure. So Jason, I believe his last name is Jurjevich, is a professor at the U of A, and he and his husband moved to Tucson, and in the process of buying a house, discovered the racist covenant language that was still in there, I guess in the deed. Anyway, through the process, they discovered this language, and Jason decided to undertake a project to map the racist covenants in Tucson. And the racist covenants were a way for particularly builders back in before it was illegal to segregate communities through the deeds of the property. And it basically prohibited anybody that was not white from buying the property. And this was a common practice throughout Tucson, and was one of the main ways that Tucson became segregated. So anyway, Jason and various students are undertaking what is an incredibly tedious process. I mean, I think they literally are going to have to go down to the Pima County Recorder's office and look at the deeds and go through actual documents and microfiche to figure this out and to map where these racist covenants are. But about, I guess it was before Christmas, so I don't know, maybe 2 months ago, he had a kickoff event. Allison, you were there, I think, and Liz was there. Neto was there, I was there. But anyway, there was a kickoff event with a panel. I had the honor of being on the panel as well, and just talking about experiences with racist covenants and things of that nature. So anyway, that's the project. It's underway now, and they're, like I said, mapping where these covenants are in Tucson. So that's really, I think, the details. I don't know that there's a whole lot more to it at this point. I do think, Jason would certainly be willing to brief the full commission, if not our subcommittee as well, kind of as that project progresses. So I don't know that there's anything more really that I can tell you all about it. Are there any thoughts or questions about that?
I'm a little familiar with it, and I hope you don't mind, but I'm gonna promote Newsies, which is now Scripps News, because that they did a piece on it. I think they may have even done an hour, and there were people all over the country saying they didn't know that it was in the document. I had heard of it happening here in Tucson. I have never seen in my hand the document, but I assume by now we don't have it in any current documents in this city. Do we, is the question I have for everybody? So we do. Okay.
So that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Mike. And that's I mean, there's discussion about that, right? So the documents still exist. The racist language is still in often, sometimes sales documents, and definitely I think in the actual deeds of properties. And they're just illegal. Well, they can't legally be enforced anymore, so they're basically null and void. But to actually have the language removed is a very difficult process, and nothing really happens when you do it, right? You spend all this time and effort. It's very difficult, and then the language is erased, but nothing really happens because aside from getting the language removed. And at least in the fair housing world, there's kind of an argument that if we're going to remove the language, there needs to be some way that it continues to be documented, because we don't want the past to essentially be erased or whitewashed. So on the one hand, it's like, how do we deal with this offensive language that clearly is not relevant anymore, or not legal and offensive, but how do we also not forget the history of the racist practices? So I know that's been a conversation in the fair housing world, at least. Thanks for bringing that up, Mike. Any other thoughts about that, Mike, or anyone else?
I was just gonna say, if you really want to learn more, they have a website as well as a link to the book Saving the Neighborhood that really explains what the racial covenants are, if anybody's interested.
Yeah, I think I did a quick search and I actually pulled it up. Let me hit this other tab. I'm looking at mappingracistcovenants.org.
That sounds like probably it. Let's see.
Yes, that's it. And at the bottom of that page is a link to the book.
Great, thanks, Vicki. If y'all are interested in this topic more as well, I do know that the city of Minneapolis was really the first city that I know of that undertook doing this on a large scale. And it's really interesting. They had tons of volunteers doing it, and I don't know where it ended up, but they were started this maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. But anyway, so that's another kind of rabbit hole one could go down if you wanted to know more about this. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, number 4 is something that I think is actually quite relevant and important to what we're working on, and that is the affirmatively furthering fair housing new proposed rule. And this is kind of obscure to a lot of folks, but in the fair housing world again, and what we're doing, it's quite important. So basically, I'd like to give a little context here. So when the Fair Housing Act was passed back in '68, there were really, the way I see it, kind of two parts to it. One is the part that I think most of us understand, right? It's like, it's illegal to discriminate today based on race, gender, national origin, et cetera, disability. And if you experience discrimination today, there's a way to seek justice and right that wrong. That's, I think, what folks kind of can understand. But there's another part called affirmatively furthering fair housing that basically says that jurisdictions, cities, towns, states have an obligation to undo segregated housing patterns and essentially foster integrated neighborhoods of opportunity. That is actually part of the law, and it is part of what the city of Tucson, Pima County, the state of Arizona are all supposed to be doing. And it's one of the few things, let me rephrase, it is something that has never really been enforced. And it's always been confusing for jurisdictions as to what exactly they're supposed to do. George Romney, who was Mitt Romney's father, I believe he was a senator, I think, back in the day, but he was in Nixon's cabinet. I guess he was I think he was the director of HUD. And he actually did, in the beginning, was like, if cities and towns don't start to do this and show that they're doing it, he started the process to withhold federal funds from those jurisdictions. And when Nixon found out, he basically had Romney removed from office. So that was kind of the last, decades ago, the last real effort. Then in 2015, the Obama administration released an AFFH rule that was much more detailed. It explained kind of what the type of report essentially that cities were supposed to put together, how they were supposed to measure whether or not they were essentially creating more equitable communities. And then under the Trump administration, that process was suspended. Now, fast forward, and the Biden administration is basically reinstating the 2015 rule. There's some kind of changes in how it's being applied, but essentially it's cities are now going to have to do what's called, they're now, instead of calling it an assessment of fair housing like they did in 2015, they're actually calling it an equity study. And cities are supposed to now measure how they're addressing equity and making progress. It's in the rule-making phase, so that there will be a lot of public comment. HUD will take the feedback and eventually, hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, the new rule will be out, and Tucson and Pima County will be required to produce this equity study. And obviously, I think it's important because it really dovetails nicely with a lot of the work that the ASU students did. And I think the kind of baseline that the equity report that the ASU students did with what the city is already doing, frankly, really forms a good baseline to produce this equity study. So anyway, it's a pretty big deal. This just kind of came out the last week or two, and I shared some documents there on the CEHD website, some fact sheets and stuff like that. So yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to kind of cue in and give a plug. If anybody's interested in more about that fight between Nixon and Romney, one of the chapters of this book, it's called Public Housing Myth, Perception, Reality, and Social Policy, edited by Nicholas Dagan Bloom, Fritz Umbach, and Lawrence J. Vail. Chapter 5 is called Public Housing Ended in Failure During the 70s by Yona Freemark. And it really kind of goes into the depth of how funding for HUD got lost in that fight. And we think of a lot of budget cuts in the 80s to public services that really began during that Romney-Nixon kind of fight in the late 60s and early 70s. The whole book's actually really good. I think it's from Cornell University Press.
What's the name of the book again?
What's that?
What was the name of the book again?
Public Housing Myths, Perception, Reality, and Social Policy. If you look for stuff by Lawrence J. Vail, you'll find a lot of stuff about public housing. And he does one of the essays, as does Bloom. And I think Bloom also did another book called Public Housing That Worked, which is about the New York City Housing Authority and kind of the successes and failures there. Vail's got 5 or 6 books about public housing that are really good. But yeah, specifically, there's a chapter that goes into a little bit more depth about the Romney and Nixon situation. So I wanted to plug that.
Cool, thanks. Any other thoughts or comments about that? I think at this point, I just really wanted to bring it to the attention of the subcommittee. It is also, I asked for about 10 minutes on the full commission agenda to bring this to the full commission's attention as well, because again, I do think it really is right in the pocket with what we're trying to do. And I think it will provide a pretty great framework for really doing, I think, a lot of the stuff that the students point out that could be done differently in Tucson. So any thoughts, questions, concerns about that piece of the puzzle? Okay. Number 5, discussion of issues related to gentrification and displacement. I believe it was at our last meeting or 2 meetings ago where Allison gave us a presentation about gentrification and displacement. Ideas for action. So based on kind of what we were presented and what we've been thinking about, it's kind of going back to this topic. Are there any thoughts about ideas for action around this topic?
I don't have any ideas for action at the moment, but just because there are some things in motion, which I'm not sure if there's any action to be taken currently. And one of the top things, and Jay and I had been chatting about this before everybody joined the meeting. I'm involved in that Norte Sur potential high capacity transit situation. And it's neither here nor there. It's just that there are a lot of concerns about gentrification and segregation if this were to come be in place. And you know, South Tucson, they're very serious about it. My take, being somewhat as a person who's been helping to try to help disseminate the information, I think people are being overly concerned initially without listening to the facts. It's like they've already made up their mind, and then when I try to share the facts with them, their mind is already made up. So they think it's definitely going to be a bad thing. Having said that, also yesterday I was telling Jay that I was taking some people on the tour of some of the bus routes, and was surprised to find that I believe they're considering putting in what they're calling potential affordable housing at the Ronstadt Transit Center, as well as maybe trying to do it at like malls like they've been doing across the country, including now the Tucson Mall. I think they're doing a little something at the Foothills Mall. And so in my mind, I was concerned about gentrification and segregation in those regards. I mean, I haven't fully thought it out. I'm just saying I am considering what the possibilities could be, positive and negative. So I just wanted to mention that, and I think Joe is probably going to have much more great information than I've got right now.
Go ahead, Joe.
I mean, about Norte Sur, I probably don't have more information than you do, Mike, but you know, you guys get to hear the housing side. I'm a huge transit advocate too. I think bus rapid transit is conceptually a terrific idea. But I know a lot of the people in South Tucson that are concerned about it. The Casa Maria folks, you know, even the ones on the city council, Brian and Roxy and Cesar, all have concerns about displacement and concerns about affordability. We've all seen kind of what happened with the streetcar. The streetcar is touted as a big success because it drove lots of investment and lots of money into the area around the streetcar. And the concern is that bus rapid transit would replicate the inequities and inequalities that were perpetuated by, or well, not by the streetcar, but perhaps precipitated by the streetcar and happened around that streetcar area. So when we got in the CEHD, the presentation about Norte Sur, my first question was, you guys have some ideas about where you want the route to go. How much land do you have banked for the affordable housing? And the answer was, we're looking at the land. At which point, my concern is that the speculation has started and it's going to already be too late to acquire some of that land. I don't know if that's going to be actually the case or not, but that's a concern. And I know that the end result, we don't want to be the how it's been around the streetcar. We don't want it to be the situation like Los Angeles has had, where they've expanded bus transit in lots of places, and all of a sudden the people who were most in need of and most likely to use the bus transit can't afford to live near where the transit is. So the transit's great. We need the transit. Whenever we see the studies about transit-oriented development, they're based on cities with much better transit than Tucson. So we get we tout the benefits of the transit-oriented development, but our transit isn't in the place where it all makes sense at this point. So I'd love to have the better transit. I want to make sure, and I think we all want to make sure, that people who will use the transit and not go, screw it, I've got 2 cars, can live near the transit. And that's really the concern with Nordic Sur. And when we get into the nuts and bolts, being able to do affordable housing means that we need to be able to have the land around the transit. And if we haven't started on the land banking and we're just thinking about that now, that's a concern.
Yeah, if I may, Jay,
Yeah.
I agree with you, Joe. To go back to the streetcar, I was of the mind when they first came up with it and the whole thing, I never had my question answered. My question was, why? Why are we having the streetcar and why are we not having the streetcar? And who's it for? What was the idea? And, you know, it just happened. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. With the high capacity transit, I completely agree with you. It's like, I've already, you know, I'm putting out information, I'm bringing information back. As a citizens of this city, I still have questions. I am like, why are we doing this? Is this the best way to do it? Who's going to get hurt? Who's going to, and I agree with you. As soon as you throw out the thought balloon, hey, we're thinking about putting out high capacity transit. Oh yeah, I agree. They're going to be going, well, how much? Yep. How much can I get for this? I was with you on that one. Way ahead at the beginning. Absolutely. And I can get a little blind, everybody, on when it comes to housing and transportation in regards to segregation and inequality. When I see like transportation and the opportunity for low-income housing and affordable housing and for it to come together, I'm all for it, maybe too much, because you know, we don't want everybody all in the same place. You know, I could, if I had my way without paying attention, yeah, I could make that happen. So I understand about making sure we have affordable housing throughout the city of Tucson, equitable. I understand that. And I get blind, like I said, I admit, I get blind about it sometimes because I'm looking at, hey, I can serve all of these people in this area right here, you know, with these tools. So I apologize for that. You're going to have to help keep me aware of that. But thank you, Jay.
Well, I think too, you know, your question is such a good one, Mike, of like, well, why do this? What are the positives and negatives? And I think a lot of it really has to do with just federal funding that's available. You know, the city of Tucson took advantage of federal funding that was available for the streetcar. I mean, could they have done something different? I'm not sure, probably, but you know, Tucson wasn't the only city that took advantage of federal funding available at the time to do a streetcar. And I can almost I would be willing to put money on the fact that the reason there's a study about Norte Sur is because there's funding from the federal government to study transit of some sort, probably rapid, you know, high capacity transit. So that's what's going on. It's not like the city of Tucson, or any city for that matter, I don't think, generally speaking, is wealthy enough to be like, oh, we're going to build a streetcar, or oh, we're going to fund these massive studies. I mean, those directives, I think, are generally coming from the federal government. So the other part of this too, I think, that is instructive about the equity study that the ASU students did is that and to what you're saying, both of you, Joe and Mike, are saying, is without a policy and strategy in place that always applies, you're going to get the gentrification and displacement. So again, what are the policies and strategies that are always in place, that are always applied, that are working to mitigate these things that we know are coming? And I feel like, to me, that's the weakness. And again, I'm like, you know, with all of the different plans and stuff, if the city has those, it just doesn't, even for those of us that are informed and on the commission, for us not to be able to articulate what those are, which I really can't. You know, maybe that's partly my fault, because obviously I'm not, you know, enmeshed in the research and, you know, all of the policies of the city all the time. But like, you know, it seems more clear to me that, like particularly Austin and Seattle, at the very least, they are always thinking about it, and there's a clear strategy to deal with it. Whether or not that strategy always works well all the time, I mean, that remains to be seen, but at least there's an intention and an attempt to address these issues. Because I mean, at the end of the day too, I just feel like a lot of this really is about the fact that the federal government just does not provide enough funding for cities and counties and whoever to build affordable housing, right? If there was a steady flow of dollars to build affordable housing, it would be a no-brainer, right? The city of Tucson would say, we've got this great opportunity to do Norte Sewer, and we've got $80 billion to build affordable housing. Obviously, we're going to build it along Norte Sewer. That money doesn't exist, I don't think. So, I think it's a real catch-22, because if you're not investing in all of the things at the same time, when you have this kind of public funding for improvements, people move to where improvements are, and that inevitably displaces people. So it just, to me, seems like the continuous cycle. But I do think there's more that we can be done. So anyway, that's kind of my take on it. I think, Joe, you've got your hand up again. Go ahead.
Yeah, my last point on the transit part of it would be that my hope was that the streetcar would drive overall transit investment in Tucson to improve all of it, so that we had buses that ran more frequently, more hours, all the kind of things that make up a better transit system. My wake up call on that was years ago when I lived like outside of Tucson to the north, trying to get a bus from like Oracle and Ina to Speedway and Alvernon, and that taking an hour and 20 minutes. It was wild. You couldn't do it. As a working person, you ended up spending 3 extra hours of your day trying to do that commute. So those kind of improvements are really welcome. So the streetcar would drive more of that, and to have optimism about Norte Sur, I would hope that would address some of those issues and also continue to perpetuate more investment in that system, so that we do have a transit system that we can say, hey, this is one of the better ones in the United States. This is a really good one. Because when you look at TOD surveys, they're looking at the Bay Area and BART, they're looking at Washington, they're looking at SEPTA in Philadelphia, they're looking at places that have really extensive transit systems. The other part of the initial question was, do we have recommendations about what to do? And I still look at it as kind of two prongs, one of them being tenant protections. And we know in the last Housing First Subcommittee meeting, which was in October, Joanna Carr laid out a bunch of those that I think are good ideas. And some of that stuff, as we see our legislative session ramping up this year, there are bills around some of that stuff. I think Annalise Ortiz has proposed a couple bills that talk about some better protections for tenants. They're not going to go anywhere in our legislature, but starting to introduce the bills is, I think, a step forward. And I hope that the city would support those and say, hey, we'd love to do these kind of things if that bill went through. That's why we support this bill. And the other part is, tenant protection is one part. The other part of it that I think of is trying to get more housing units into the hands of our community members, and not just through individual housing purchase programs, but support of housing co-ops and community land trusts. So I think those are, expansion of community land trusts and those holdings. And we just overall at every level refuse to talk about co-ops. They were mentioned in the ASC report, at least. I saw there's a little bit in there, but gosh, some kind of a supportive lending program or getting partners for something to help with that form of community home ownership holding, where it's not just people who are going to buy it up and jack up the rent on everybody. Those are the two things, suggestion-wise, that are on my mind. Thanks, Jim.
What, so number one, Joe, was tenant protections, and number two was what?
If I had to categorize it briefly, I would say community controlled housing.
Okay, yeah.
And you can think of it really as the same as a lot of people talk about like social housing kind of models.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing. It doesn't use the word social because social is a bad word in America. But yeah, it's just, you know, community controlled, and that community can be public housing is the broadest one, of course, because that's national. You know, we elect the people who control that. You go down a level, community land trust. Okay, it's the community that elects a board to control the land trust, and down at the bottom level of that is co-ops, where it's the people who actually live there, that community that's controlling it, not speculative investors, not a landlord consortium. Community control of housing.
Great, thanks, Joe. Also, just yesterday, the Biden, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was not yesterday, but anyway, just this week, the Biden administration announced a new actions to protect renters and promote rental affordability. So I haven't had a chance to look at that, but there is even obviously at the national level some movement. Whether or not it goes anywhere is remains to be seen, but at least there's something coming out about it. So if you like Google, you know, Biden renter protections or something, that information will come up, but that's something to watch as well. I would propose as far as ideas for action around this issue as the subcommittee. I guess I don't feel like there's something that really I feel like we need to do. I feel like we have now kind of put this on the map as something that needs to be addressed. And I feel like with the equity study, with the AFFH rule, I feel like it's now kind of integrated into that. So I feel like I feel like we're moving the ball forward. I could be wrong. I mean, is there anything that y'all feel like at this meeting that we need to do in terms of like a call to action or recommendation to the commission, or I would like to leave it on our agenda so we can continue to talk about it. But what do y'all think about any action items around this at this point?
Question. I don't know what's going on with the Housing First subcommittee, with Liz Wilson leaving Tucson. I don't know who would be responsible for taking the content of that last meeting where they talked about tenant protections and advancing that to the commission of the whole.
I think a new chair is being elected at our next full commission meeting, so I would imagine that's how it would go, but I'm not sure.
Okay, if we want to say that since that happened in that commission, that kind of advancing that agenda is going to start at Housing First, that's fine. If that commission was not going to be perpetuated or have regular meetings, then I would suggest it's got to come from somewhere.
Right.
If I may, Jay?
Yeah.
As the co-chair, I guess, of that subcommittee, it kind of, to be honest with you, it came surprised me. I didn't know about, you know, Liz leaving until she announced she was leaving. I was like, oh, like, okay. And so I had intended on holding a regular meeting for no other reason as to, hey, well, you know, I got to jump in the pool. But it was postponed. And like Jay said, I believe I got an email from Neto. I believe it's going to be brought up to the full commission at the upcoming meeting. Specifically about what, I'm not sure, but I believe it's going to be an agenda item.
I'm pretty sure it's electing a chair, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, I've been trying to just to kind of aside, I've been trying to find out how many members of the commission are not on a subcommittee, so I could find out who's available, so I could talk with those who need to, you know, so we can spread out the labor a little bit, you know.
Yeah, makes sense. Vicky, Lori, do y'all have any thoughts about action items or anything around this issue topic at this point? If not, I'm happy to move on, but I want to give you all a shout out. Okay. Number 6 is HAST implementation updates and discussion. Allison, here's looking at you.
Let's see. I think I have a couple things on there. So the latest source of income protection saga update is that the new Attorney General Chris Mays agreed to review. Right, what has happened since we last met? Since we last met, actually, a lot has happened. So actually, since we last met, the previous Attorney General declared our source of income protection ordinance, it was preempted by state law and therefore kind of a violation of the 1487. Is that the right number? And therefore, if the city of Tucson had 30 days to remedy that violation or risk losing our state shared revenue. Mayor and council met at their first January meeting and asked the new Attorney General to review that determination. And in order to not foul of the previous determination, decided to pause enforcement of the source of income protection ordinance to give time for the new Attorney General to review it, decide if she would review it, and issue a determination. So currently, we are not enforcing the source of income protection component of our fair housing and human relations. But the new Attorney General has agreed to review, based on her standing. So we're waiting for that to come down. In the meantime, the kind of enforcement is paused, but I think while we were in the midst of things, I believe the city's EEOP, Office of Equal Opportunity Protections, received 4 source of income protection complaints, and that was kind of being pursued and investigated further. Jay, does that sound correct to you?
Yeah.
Okay. That's my understanding. But that we also, and I need to get actual numbers on this. I think we also got a lot more landlords just during that time period kind of sign up to be housing choice voucher landlords. So we're considering that a success for the fall. Just the fact of having the ordinance kind of brought additional landlords on board. So we'll keep you updated on that piece.
Allison, can I just jump in here and say also, just a little inside baseball, since we, obviously I deal with fair housing. It's not such a bad thing, in my opinion, that the enforcement was paused, because there were some kinks to work out with how enforcement was going to work. So, obviously, you don't ever want to see anything like this paused, but, under the circumstances, I think we narrowly escaped and probably be able to keep the source of income protection in place. And it should give us a little bit more time to kind of get our ducks in a row about how this is actually getting enforced. So, what initially was devastating has, I think, ended up not being that at all, and not being quite so bad. So just wanted to throw that in there.
I also meant to mention that in the course of kind of figuring out the source of income kind of enforcement and education piece, Jay has in his role in the South Housing Council has been kind of instrumental in advising and being a key partner in that, kind of encouraged us, the city, to look into, I'm gonna have him or Cecilia say the actual acronym, FAP status,
You got it, man. You got it.
What does it say? Fair Housing Agency
Assistance.
Yeah.
Assistance Program. Okay,
Fair
yes,
Housing
thank you.
Assistance Program, yeah.
Where the city would actually be able to investigate fair housing complaints that kind of come under the city's fair ordinance. So we're Cecilia, one of the reasons I invited her to this meeting, has been kind of looking into that for us, talking to HUD, talking to others like Phoenix who have a similar program. The first thing we would need to do is actually, again, amend our ordinance to make it substantially equivalent to the federal fair housing ordinance. So, but yeah, just has also spurred the city to kind of think a little bit more about our role in fair housing enforcement and try that up a bit. Any questions on that one? Moving on to the reasoning plan timeline, again, is I don't have a huge update in terms of the public housing repositioning, other than to say that we within the last month have hired a consultant who is going to be walking us through kind of creating that repositioning plan, with the goal of going to the Mayor and Council Board of Commissioners in June. And so the commission, the CEHD commission, that kind of plan and ideas around that plan will be brought to the commission prior to that Mayor and Council. So look for that sometime this spring, is kind of the current update.
Cool.
All I have.
Thanks,
Unless folks
Allison.
have questions.
Any questions, comments? I will just say I am really excited about the city of Tucson exploring the possibility of becoming a FAP agency. And just a little tiny bit more context. So we have the Southwest Fair Housing Council, right? People call us up and we're essentially advocates for folks that have had their fair housing rights violated. And if we file a complaint or somebody wants to file a complaint, the way to do that is you can file it directly with HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development, or in Arizona, you can file it with a FAP agency, and a FAP agency basically represents HUD in enforcing the Fair Housing Act. So the state attorney general is a FAP agency, and so anything that takes place in the state of Arizona, the attorney general's office has jurisdiction as far as fair housing. And then the city of Phoenix is also a FAP agency. So any fair housing violation under the federal Fair Housing Act that takes place within the city of Phoenix can be enforced by the city of Phoenix's, I don't remember what the department is called exactly. And so now the city of Tucson is exploring being able to, on behalf of HUD, enforce the federal Fair Housing Act as well. And again, just a little more inside baseball. I don't know how interesting it is to y'all or not, but due to the nature of the politics of the previous attorney general, it is my opinion that fair housing enforcement was not a high priority of the previous attorney general. And so I believe it made it more difficult than necessary to enforce the Fair Housing Act. And when you have other outlets like the city of Phoenix or potentially the city of Tucson, it gives another avenue for filing fair housing complaints that could or would have been more effective than potentially going through the previous attorney general. Of course, this is my opinion, but having more options, I think, is overall a really positive thing. So I'm hoping the city can make that happen. It's not nothing. It doesn't just happen overnight, but I do also think that the city should be applauded by CEHD really for centering fair housing and really taking it seriously. Again, just my opinion, but I think it's a great move forward. Any other thoughts or questions, concerns, comments before we move on from agenda item number 6? Okay, number 7 is a call to the audience. That would be you, Joe, so I'm not going to read this whole thing on the agenda. Would you like to say anything else that you haven't said already, Mr. Audience Member?
Yeah, sure. You know, I like to take the opportunity to go off topic. I want to, number one, thank this commission for actually meeting. The last meeting of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee was, I believe, November 16th. The Housing First Subcommittee was November 30th. And the regular commission meeting on January 5th was canceled. So, you know, thanks to the 4 of y'all and Allison and Neto and everybody for actually being here for something we call a crisis all the time. It sure as heck feels like a lot of people can't make time for it, even though they said they want to be here on these committees and subcommittees. Number 2, I attended a terrific webinar a couple weeks ago. It was January 12th, and it was from the UCLA Luskin Institute on Inequality and Democracy, not to be confused with UCLA's Lewis Center. It was just called The Right to Housing. It featured United Nations Special Rapporteurs on the right to adequate housing from 2008 to today. Raquel Rolnick, Leilani Farha, and Balakrishnan Rajagopal, as well as Gary Blasi, a tenant power attorney, very prominent one from California, somebody from the ACLU, and a couple of community organizers, including Los Angeles Community Action Network. It was about an hour and a half, and it was terrific. If anybody watching the video wants to find it, go to challengeinequality.luskin.ucla.edu. And Luskin is Luskin for those here. It's in the chat because somebody left the chat on. Thank you. Yeah, it was good, and some of it was a little California centric about what laws would have to change to really reflect the priority of a right to housing. But I think even that was instructive. The host was Anand Roy from Luskin Institute, and it was really good. The people in there were really good. If you're interested in those Biden rules, then there's National Low Income Housing Statement on it, which also has a link to the blueprint for tenant rights that was suggested by the White House. And finally, one of the interesting developments that was written about this month was a bunch of people from New York, some legislators, some community activists, took a trip to Austria and toured the social housing projects in Vienna, as well as got presentations from people who run those projects about how social housing functions with government support in Vienna, Austria. Some of them you've heard of, India Walton, who was mayoral candidate in Buffalo recently. A lot of people, and the Nation had a good interview with some of them. So there that is. That's all I've got for call to the audience. Thank you for the time.
Cool, thanks, Joe. Always appreciate you sharing the resources and research and whatnot that you have done and participated in. I pulled up the right to housing thing. Look forward to watching that. I think you are the only person from the audience. So with that, we will move on to number 8, next steps. Our next meeting is February 23rd, 2023 at 1 p.m. I believe Allison has sent out calendar invites for our upcoming meetings. I may have asked you guys this before, but I want to ask it again anyway. How is everybody feeling about how we are doing these meetings, how I am running these meetings? I'm assuming we can do them differently. I haven't really put much thought behind it aside from I got elected chair of the subcommittee, and this is just what I've been doing. So I'm happy to hear any feedback and frankly do this differently if you all think something would be more effective. I certainly won't have my feelings hurt or anything like that if we want to do this differently. So just want to check in with everybody and get some feedback. If there's no feedback, that's fine. If you'd rather contact me offline as well, I'm happy to chat, but wanted to throw that out there and see if you all have any thoughts or feelings or comments about how we're doing these meetings.
I think this is Vicky. I think you're doing a great job, Jay. I did just wonder, shouldn't we be the anti-segregation committee? I I was writing that the other day and I'm like, I don't think I want to tell anybody I'm on the segregation subcommittee. I know it's a bit late to bring that up, but
or the housing desegregation subcommittee.
yeah, like anti or desegregate, something like that.
Yeah. Somebody could make a motion, I guess, that we call ourselves the housing desegregation subcommittee. I mean,
So moved.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Cool. So now we're the housing desegregation subcommittee. I love it.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, and in fact, Jay, I think it was my class. And Jay was a guest speaker in my class on Tuesday talking about fair housing issues. So
And the students were like, "What the hell, Vicky? Why are you on a segregation?"
yes.
We got schooled by some students. Oh no.
Yeah. Well, they didn't actually say anything. I think it was when I was actually saying out loud publicly, it struck me that
That's hilarious. See, we can do something. We can change our name at the very least. That's, that's not nothing, I guess.
my only question is, does that then, I can't remember, are the subcommittees, I think they're listed in the bylaws. So does that require a bylaws change?
Who knows? We'll see. Somebody will
Okay.
tell us. Some person will tell us something if we didn't do this correctly.
I would recommend bringing it up and potentially making in the CEHD full commission meeting.
We will. We're rebelling against our name. So anyway, cool. Also, I appreciate that, Vicky. That was me low-key fishing for compliments. So there's any criticism or any really, I mean, if along the way you guys want to change how we're doing these meetings, I'm more than happy to do it. I don't feel any need or obligation to quote lead the meetings, but I'm happy to do that if that's working for people. So any other thoughts or comments about how we're doing our meetings? Okay, cool. What do y'all want to talk about at our next meeting? It's item for future meetings. Anything else we want to add to our agenda? I mean, in some ways, I would like to keep the agenda kind of what it is, because I think we're still working our way through some of these things, but we can certainly change it up, add some things.
Yeah, I kind of got an idea, but I'd like to wait and pull it together a little bit more comprehensive, and then maybe pitch it to you for an agenda item, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, I guess we generally do the agendas for these meetings, like we can add stuff to them kind of almost up to the meeting. We just need to get them on the website, the agenda on the website. Is that right, Allison?
Yeah, our deadline for sending to the clerk's office is 48 hours ahead of time, so that it can be 24 hours ahead of the meeting for open meeting law. But I recently decided to kind of do a shared document. So Jay and Lori have the link to that shared document and can add agenda items throughout the month. So they kind of contact any one of us to get agenda items posted.
Okay. And then in regards to this idea I have in my head, Vicky, Lori, which one of you, well, we had a quick conversation a while ago and you were telling me, don't forget about home ownership. Was it Vicky or was it Lori? I couldn't remember because I was focused on rentals. Okay, I thought it had come up in a past conversation somewhere. I wanted to touch base with one of you. Okay, let me think it through some more.
Sounds familiar, though. I feel like we discussed it
Well,
in the group.
It may have been you then, Vicky. Okay, hang on. All right, I'll make a note.
well, I know also that Betty Villegas and Maggie Amato Tellez brought up the idea that we were not focusing enough as a commission on home ownership. I don't know if there was I believe that was at a full commission meeting. I don't know if there was another conversation that you had, Mike, but I remember that at the very least.
That's probably what it was. Okay.
All right, so obviously, if anything else comes up that y'all want to have on the next agenda, you can contact me or Lori or Allison. Happy to put anything else on the list. Mike, obviously, if you want to talk anything through, I'm sure I or others are happy to do that as well to get something on the agenda. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead, Lori.
Oh, I don't have anything.
Oh, you were unmuted. I was like,
I don't even know how that happened.
no worries. Okay, if there's nothing else, y'all, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks for showing up, and I appreciate all the great conversation, and I'll see y'all soon, hopefully.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See y'all.